Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. Give people a few more seconds to join, and then we're going to get started. We're going to have a great session with Christy Horner and Jenny Woodworth, two of my very close personal friends. I've been in their lives forever. Forever meaning last month. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to pull my script over here. Hopefully, y'all can't see it, but it will look like I'm looking right at y'all. Again, welcome. I'm sad it's the last day of the summit, but it's been amazing. I hope it's been amazing for everyone. Please bear with us through some technical difficulties, but we're going to get started. We'd like to remind everyone of our commitment to maintaining a safe and accountable space. If you experience issues and need assistance, please reach out to me by sending me a direct message. My name is Bridget Ukawu. You can search me in the people or you can chat me on here. We'll figure things out. To walk you through a few of the session tools, I'd like to draw your attention to the vertical bar on the right-hand side of your screen that has several icons. So if you've been here with us over the last 2 days, you know this, but please bear with me. So for the new people, if your event feed is open, you will not see the vertical bar for the session. So make sure you click that X on the event feed so you can see the in-chat tools, in-session tools, excuse me. So once you've closed that event feed, you will see speech squares, you will see the chat box, you will see the Q&A icon, and please use the Q&A to ask questions to the presenters. This chat can move very, very quickly, so please put your questions there so we can make sure we get to them. Lastly, you'll see two papers stacked on top of one another. These are where your resources will be from the presenter. So you can download the resources and follow along with the presenters as well. To enable us to keep, so we talked about the questions in the chat. If at any time during this session you need to step away, take a break, or debrief, decompress, please feel free to do so. Our wellness room is open all day. You can enter the wellness room by clicking on the booths at the top of the left-hand side of the horizontal navigation bar, and a member of our team will meet you there. So I'm going to stop here and let our wonderful, my besties, my best friends, introduce themselves, and they'll take it from here.
Thank you so much, Bridget. And we get it. We were just sharing before everyone jumped in that technology will likely present challenges as one of our group norms, because we just know in today's world that something's going to happen and we have to be prepared for that. And that's the same as caregivers as well. So we're so excited to have you with us. We're so excited to be presenting and have Bridget as such a tenured now great friend with us in this work. My name is Christy Horner. I'm the founder, executive director, and a certified family peer supporter for Courage to Caregivers, a nonprofit that you'll learn a little bit more about this morning, located here in Northeast Ohio, now supporting unpaid family caregivers to those living with behavioral health challenges throughout North America and Canada. And I am joined today by my esteemed colleague, Jenny. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Jenny Woodworth, licensed independent social worker in the state of Ohio, and director of programs here for Courage to Caregivers. Again, shout out to Bridget, who pivoted so quickly to help this morning, and to Lisa, who is feeling like, ugh, I can't get technology. And again, we've all felt that way before. So thanks, everybody. We're so glad to be here. You all have had a great conference, great summit, and we're going to talk a little bit more today about the ripple effect of the unpaid family caregiver.
Mm-hmm. And so this is new technology for us. So as we do that, bear with us as well. So we love knowing when we present what to expect. We also love to know when we're listening to a session, what to expect throughout the course of our time together. And so in this next hour together, we're going to talk about what's the problem from our perspective. We're going to talk about what our potential unique solution, what one of the solutions might look like. We're going to talk about the ripple effect and what that means for us in relationship to systems of care, and really critically, the role of the unpaid family caregiver on that care team for a loved one living with a behavioral health challenge. We're going to talk about family peer support and how that is part of what our solution is to filling the gap and an essential part of the systems of care. We're going to talk about creating a community of care through trauma-informed caregiving. And I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I heard someone talking. And that leads to post-traumatic growth. We're going to talk about post-traumatic growth, what's empathy and compassion, and we're going to talk about how to support caregivers as we share some of our research around caregiver personas and what that looks like as you work with caregivers in your profession. So we're glad you're here with us to dig deep into that. But before we talk about caregiving, we always do a little check-in. Jenny, let's ask people to check in.
We sure do. I love that this summit has a wellness room. Part of my usual kind of check-in is like, hey, take care of yourselves. We're talking about hard things, not just in this session, but many of the sessions. So really take advantage of all the resources that this amazing summit provides. We do like to know how you're feeling. We have some words on the screen that we use both in presentations with caregivers, and they are flourishing, kind of managing, and languishing. So if you want to put in the chat, maybe if any of these words resonate with you, or if you're feeling something utterly different. I mean, I know I always feel a little nervous, even though I've done many presentations at this point. So I'm feeling a little nervous, but I do feel motivated by, again, all the people that want to work within these systems, whether we're feeling like they're broken, whether we're feeling like they are supporting folks. I really am glad to be here. So if people want to put in the chat, I see managing, motivated but tired. Yeah, that's a good one. I feel motivated but tired as well, in addition to feeling a little bit kind of elevated and a little nervous. Christy, how are you?
I'd say I'm solidly between, managing and flourishing today. These always give me some renewed energy as we meet people that we haven't met before in this format. It's also Thursday, so solidly, as we land towards the end of a week, just that whole managing, getting by feeling. So.
Thanks for sharing. We have some other people feeling happy, some people resonating with the word flourishing, other people resonating with the word languishing. Yeah, all feelings are welcome here for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you. We keep up that chat going. We love seeing that. We love to see driving engagement. We will leave a few minutes at the end for questions perhaps, but really know that in this format, we will keep an eye on that chat. So as we start most of our presentations looking at understanding this real epidemic of burnout, and caregiver burnout is very real. And whether you're an unpaid family caregiver like myself, a professional caregiver also like myself and Jenny, or whether you're both also like me. So no matter what kind of caregiver you are, understanding what that compassion fatigue can lead to burnout is really, really important. So we like to normalize and validate this language of compassion fatigue and burnout so that we're talking about the same problem. But you may have experienced some of these before, that concept of emotional and physical exhaustion, potentially health problems, maybe you have trouble sleeping, potentially trauma, primary or secondary trauma, irritability, stress, indeed compassion fatigue or burnout. So compassion fatigue is that physical and emotional exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people for an extended period of time. It's a very normal response to managing an extreme experience, such as being a constant caregiver for someone with an inconsistent illness. Burnout comes on slowly as that stress of caregiving builds, but compassion fatigue strikes quickly as our resources hit that empty line. So we see Courage to Caregivers being in the caregiver burnout prevention business. And we're going to talk about prevention a bit this morning because we look at ourselves as empowering unpaid family caregivers as we build their resilience superpowers or their tools for their toolbox. Some signs of professional caregiver burnout we want you to be aware of is less energy, emotional exhaustion, reduced productivity, motivation, or energy, neglecting your own mental or physical health, increased impatience or irritability, or feeling helpless and hopeless. And of course, we'd be very remiss if we didn't mention that if you are one of those that are feeling helpless or hopeless, that to seek professional help, seek help from a trusted colleague, mentor, a professional of your own. We believe that therapy is the #1 form of self-care for unpaid and professional caregivers, because that is a really important sign for yourself. So be aware of that. Secondary traumatic stress is a really important concept to be aware of, and you likely are. And that's that emotional duress that results from individuals hearing about the firsthand trauma experiences of another. And for those of us as helpers who have the privilege of having someone share those traumatic experiences with us, it takes an emotional toll. And it takes the same toll on a personal or family caregiver. So being aware of that secondary, or sometimes it's called vicarious traumatic stress. So signs to be aware of for that are unusual fear, excessive worry above and beyond what may feel normal for you, jumpiness, focused on traumatic outcomes, a racing heart, a shortness of breath, tension headaches, or potentially taking on others' trauma stories as your own. And I think as peers, that's something that we really face on a regular basis. And I know that I seek the support of Jenny as my peer supervisor within Courage to Caregivers. When she presents a new client for me, she's always wary of their story and how mine might align and cause that secondary traumatic stress, or really keeping in mind in her supervision of me and my ongoing reflection with her, how she can best support me, knowing that that's a potential with a certain client. So just being aware of that, seeking professional help, seeking support from a supervisor or mentor. When we look at prevention, we would really like to say that because we do say we're in the caregiver burnout prevention business, we'd like to say that we solidly do prevention work. And yet just about everyone who calls and reaches out is a caregiver in crisis. Because let's face it, when you're managing, you don't think you need any help. But when you're not managing, or when a crisis emerges, you need a lot of help. So our mission is to provide hope, support, and courage to caregivers and loved ones of those living with mental illness. Of course, we support carers of all kinds because we're really focused on that unpaid family caregiver and their mental health and well-being. And we know that the toll it takes of caring for someone with an inconsistent illness of any kind takes its toll on the unpaid family caregiver. So that's what we do. And we like to say we're in the prevention business, but honestly, Jenny, we know we've got work to do there.
For sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about that work here. I'm going to go just a little deeper than we do sometimes on the slide, just so we can get kind of, so we can frame this within like the caregiver working within this systems of care here. So, the caregivers that we work with and unpaid family caregivers in general often come to us feeling isolated, alone, overwhelmed by stress. They're exposed to maybe high levels of hostility from their loved one, which causes them emotional distress and maybe even physical harm. Caregivers also deal with isolation due to the disruption of their social life and financial hardships having to do with leaving the workforce to care for their loved one. And honestly, they face stigma too. I mean, especially those who are supporting someone with mental illness. So these challenges are often go on for a long time without any respite, leading to high rates of anxiety and depression, leading also to feelings of hopelessness. So some of these things we talked about with compassion fatigue and burnout. So it can also lead to sleep problems, loss of physical or emotional control, or even poor treatment of their loved one. Again, this is utterly normal. This happens when you're feeling so isolated, alone, and overwhelmed. So this stress compounded by being thrust into this role, in some cases with no notice, you get a phone call that your loved one has been admitted, and then suddenly you're a caregiver. This can be something called post-traumatic caregiving, a precursor to the term we all know, post-traumatic stress disorder. And Dr. Eppel, who we note on the screen, really is the person that had been researching a lot of this. And she says that the stress of caregiving has been found to take 10 years off of a caregiver's life. So, I mean, this is our why. We're trying to support caregivers as they reclaim those 10 years of their life. And we do it through 3 programs. We have a breathing meditation program that also is available to anyone on YouTube. We also have a coaching group, AKA support groups. We have a variety of those that meet at different times. Some are curriculum-based, curriculum of our own design. And we have one that's kind of a, hey, how are you doing? How are you coping? If you aren't coping in a way that is healthy, how can we support you as a group? We also have a variety of peer support, both certified and not certified, so through volunteers that can meet caregivers kind of where they are on an individual basis. So that's what we do. Just a little overview of where, we kind of fit into supporting caregivers as they navigate all of these systems. So yeah, prevention versus cure. Love this quote on the screen because 100%, that's what we need to do. I mean, what a quote. We know this as professional caregivers. This is our goal. No matter what kind of system we work within, where we're working, how we're doing it, whether we're working in case management, as a clinician, as a peer, we know that we want to figure out what's happening, get ahead of these feelings of burnout. But as Christy alluded to, people find us when they're like crispy, when they're like entrenched in burnout. And maybe you're seeing this in the work you do, or maybe you're also feeling this yourself. So we're going to continue, again, to talk about prevention throughout this session. And in a couple slides, Christy's going to share kind of an innovative idea that we can partner with another system of care to help with prevention of caregiver burnout. So again, we're all about shared language, so folks know where we're coming from. This is the model we used as we were developing this presentation. So if you're a professional caregiver, someone working within these systems, maybe take a second to figure out where you fit here. If you are a family caregiver, maybe you say, oh, these are systems that we are already interfacing with. So I work in dimension number 1. I've received services through a variety of these things as a person with small children, as a person with physical and mental health needs. So at Courage to Caregivers, the services we provide, again, fall under number 1. And as we're supporting caregivers, they often are navigating many or all of these systems of care. And part of our work, especially in our peer support program, is to help them navigate these numbers 1 through 10.
And then as we look at this, again, the ripple effect is not like a Christy, Jenny genius, and yet we're putting it under the lens or the context of the unpaid family caregiver. And we find it a very helpful metaphor or analogy of how we support families and really advocate for those unpaid family caregivers to be on the care team for their loved ones living with behavioral health challenges. And so if we think about the loved one living with mental illness or substance abuse disorders, behavioral health challenges as the stone that's dropped in the water, then the primary unpaid family caregivers, that first ripple or ring in the water, and then really looking at that broader support network of which all of you really encompass. And maybe you are the stone, maybe you are the first ring, and maybe you're the extended ring. And this really came to light for us as we started getting calls from that extended ripples, not just the unpaid family caregivers along the way. And it was them, the support network, that said, we're not a caregiver. We're not the ones face-to-face every day, but we're trying to support our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues who are those unpaid family caregivers to better support their loved ones. How can we do that? Please give us those tools. So this becomes almost that unseen workforce that sits behind the scene that solidly supports a whole family from behind the scenes. We often hear from families that the system is broken. And then that can be a real trigger for some people, for those of us in the system that are solidly trying to work the system. We know that unpaid family caregivers, family peer supporters offer a very unique support role to fill in the gaps in those systems of care that are meant to support families facing challenges of caring for someone living with mental illness, behavioral health challenges, substance use disorders. Caregiving is a very challenging job, and it can be a very long and winding journey with many ups and downs. I will often say, and Jenny knows this, I'm now a lifelong caregiver to someone living with an inconsistent illness. Cultivating a support team is a really essential part of caregiving, and it's a vital component of a caregiver support network. As caregivers, we make a lot of big, important, hard decisions every single day that affect our loved ones and ultimately our families. And a caregiver just shouldn't do that alone. So as we look at these ripples and these different parts to the ripple for the person with the lived illness and their primary support network, each ripple represents that layer of help that a caregiver can look to when they need it. And you likely provide that. I'm getting some weird feedback. Jenny, are you hearing that as well? Or no, just me? Okay, very strange. Technology will present challenges. And so in addition to the caregiving journey, having a team that supports the caregiver's other needs, their interests, their goals can be really essential to their ongoing growth and their loved ones' ongoing support. So for some, this personal support team looks like friends and family, and for others, it can be coworkers, professional mental health workers, personal coaches, trainers, as well as professionals to assist caregivers in their caregiver management. Caregivers are crucial to supporting their loved ones with their own lived illness and have their own needs to support, both physical and mental. And so there's a lot of different support systems out there for families, for the caregivers. We've got family, friends, neighbors, colleagues that we've mentioned. There's faith communities, including a Stephen Ministry Network, which in your area is a basically ecumenical approach of lay leadership to support members of the congregation, but really also members of the community through life's transitions. We've got caregiver support agencies like ours and many others. There are social service agencies and the supports they provide, support groups like ours and many, many others. You've got medical, including a caregiver's primary care physician, as well as our loved ones and their medical team. You've got therapists, our own as caregivers, as well as our loved ones. You've got peer supporters, which are just essential, as we've mentioned, and professional support, meaning legal, financial, and all of the other ways that we can offer support to a family as they navigate. And so just remember that that simple act of caring does create an endless ripple. I just love that. Jenny, how does trauma-informed care play in?
Sure. This is something that I know as an agency that's been very important to us from day one. We train on trauma-informed care for our employees, regardless of, their interface with clients. So this is something we consider all the time when we do this work. But particularly, we use this trauma-informed lens when we're examining how the unpaid family caregiver works within systems and how we work to uphold, repair, shore up any of these systems. How do we do that? So, I don't have to tell you that these systems we work in and receive service from aren't always trauma informed. So part of change looks at, we have to look at these 6 key principles of a trauma informed approach here on the screen. So safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural and historic and gender issues. So again, that stigma. So, some of the strategies that we can consider as we're looking at this through a trauma-informed lens is that due again to that stigma of mental illness. When people reach out to connect, they're vulnerable, afraid, and ashamed. That building trust in a culture of safety starts with the acceptance that the trauma of caregiving or any individual trauma story, that's valid. That we aren't going to question that. We're going to meet people there. We're going to say, yes, your story is valid. Your story is important. Validating those in need starts with active listening, with the goal to seek to understand and be aware of any differences that might lead to potential bias. So we're going to talk more about that kind of deep listening when we get into the project that we did around caregiver personas. So again, as I've mentioned before, stigmatization leads to isolation and loneliness. Peer support for our clients leads to feeling seen, heard, and understood by someone who's walked in their shoes. Those who are most vulnerable want to feel unconditionally accepted as much as they can. So, and Christy's going to get into more of that as we move on here. So, recognizing the immense diversity of our client populations and their particular needs, empowerment can look very different based on each client's experience and privilege. Factoring in these differences is essential when we're working with each individual client to empower them on their journey of personal growth and really their journey of caregiving.
And I just love that peer support is one of those 6 guiding principles, right? I mean, it's just, it really is so validating to the credibility of the peer supporter, especially when you look at that ripple effect in the system of care and really looking at it as a potential system, meaning a potential solution to this broken system, if you will. And so we seeing it as really, really important part. So if you're a family peer out there, just recognizing you are an essential part and you provide this trauma-informed peer support. And since it is such an important role, it recognizes and respects a survivor's safety needs and it interrupts the re-traumatization cycle. And that's really important to hearing, listening, validating a person's story. It's a basic human need, but we hear this from caregivers all the time. They want to feel seen, heard, and understood. And that is what a peer does. Because of your own lived experience and walking this walk, you can be there for the client, the peer that you have been matched with. And it's deeply rooted, this role of the peer, in not fixing them. And so often as caregivers and peers, we see that, they may feel broken, but they don't want that concept of feeling like you're here to fix me, right? We're here as peers to help people find their inner strength and sometimes this takes longer, right? To just get their feet back on the ground, solidly take one small step forward, and the next thing you know, they're taking 2, 10, they could run by the time you're done. And so it's solidly helping them move from I'm broken to thank you for being there and holding my hand on this journey. Parker Palmer, love his work, author, educator, activist, wrote, "When you speak to me about your deepest question, you do not want to be fixed or saved. You want to be seen and heard, to have your truth acknowledged and honored." To have your truth honored and acknowledged. I just love that. And so looking into that real privilege of holding someone's hand, hearing their story, and being allowed in is just, it's a huge part to that trauma-informed care that we provide. As peers of trauma survivors, we also have to preserve our own recovery and being aware of our own triggers. And just like I mentioned earlier, using my peer supervisor, which just happens to be Jenny, and understanding what that could look like, being prepared for that, owning my own journey and staying safe myself is a really important part to that. So just being aware of that as you provide support to other trauma survivors, also trying to navigate their own path of recovery. Post-traumatic growth is this concept that was fairly new to me, and yet I have lived it, so I don't know why it was new. But again, Jenny and I like to put names around things, and as we learned and explored this concept of post-traumatic growth, it became a real part of my own healing journey in the last few years. And it's essentially this concept that as we have experienced a traumatic experience, and that could be different for all of us. We all have a different story of trauma, and yet I believe we've all experienced trauma of variations. That as you've navigated that trauma and you come out of that and navigate the healing journey, that becomes post-traumatic growth. And you can see these changes, these really positive changes, and that, looking back at your trauma story and you can say, here's what I've learned from this, here's how I've grown from this, and here's how I can share this and help others. And it has most definitely, my own post-traumatic growth has definitely increased my own self-awareness, my confidence, my ability to support and help others. I'll often hear from peers as I support them is that my story provides one of hope and healing to them. And Jenny knows this, but in the beginning, I didn't think that my story was going to do that. My own personal trauma story, the reason for founding and creating Courage to Caregivers is one where I supported my brother living with severe mental illness for 4 years, and he lived with suicidal ideation. And as we navigated that journey of care for him, recognizing what was in my control and not in my control, and it became very hard because I was really at the time working to try to save him because I thought I could save him from himself. And his journey with mental illness had to be his own and not mine, and it became a very convoluted experience. Ultimately, he did lose his battle with mental illness to suicide. And for me, that became the trauma. And yet what I didn't recognize were that all those years of being his primary unpaid family caregiver, that was actually the initial trauma, because caring for someone with an inconsistent illness over a long period of time constitutes trauma. But I reserved trauma for those big T things and just did not associate my experience as trauma. I then, of course, saw his own suicide completion as trauma, and yet how I navigated that journey initially was one of shame because I didn't recognize it as something that led to ultimately my own post-traumatic growth. But as I navigated those next steps and poured my heart and soul into supporting other people to better navigate that journey as the unpaid family caregiver to someone living with mental illness, I recognized my own growth and my own healing journey through that. And that ultimately became my hope-giving experience to peers. Of course, recognizing as peers, a big part of our journey as peers and certified peers is to recognize when to share our story and when not to share our story. So I will only share that as an example today as one of my own post-traumatic growth and where that has led. So know that your story will bring hope to others, and you can be a hope giver in addition to being a caregiver. I think when we looked at this problem of supporting those ripples for a family and how we could best do that, it was actually one of our board members who came forward and said, you should consider personas for our clients, which are caregivers. And Jenny and I both, asked a lot of questions. That board member, she helped us navigate this process of using a design thinking process, which begins and ends with empathy, something we know well as carers. That feeling with, caring with another person. And so we use this great empathy mapping design thinking process. And design thinking is a framework that puts our users, for us, the caregivers, solidly at the center of the process of solving a problem. And as it begins and ends with empathy, it became, really looking at this focus of what do caregivers need? Jenny and I could sit around all day and brainstorm. Well, I talked to someone today and I think they need this. I talked to someone yesterday and they need this. But those are 2 out of hundreds of people we've supported over time. So solidly looking at what do they need. So much of what we do is listen, and I'm sure you do as well in your profession. And so advocating for and understanding caregivers is at the root of what we do so that they can feel supported. And again, it comes back to wanting to feel seen, heard, and understood. So as we explore these individual personas, and we will share those with you today, it's all about how to best communicate, support, and ultimately empower, because that's what peers do, caregivers. And depending on your role for a family, because you might be a licensed clinician, you might have different solutions and options, but as peer supporters, of which we are, it's all about that empowerment. piece, which becomes really, really important to understanding our clients. And, the prevention piece that we've talked about over time and wanting to get to more of, that Jenny alluded to earlier, is we solidly, and this is one of those systems of care where it might be broken, is looking at those primary care physicians as an essential piece to overall health and wellness and prevention for every human on the planet. And so we would promote and encourage, and if it's not already happening in your primary care annual physical, to look at helpers to encourage our caregivers to ask and share their stories with their primary care physicians, but really asking, are you caring for someone aside from yourself? Because we solidly believe you should be caring for yourself first, but are you caring for someone aside from caring for yourself? Pause, listen, yes, no. And then if so, who are you caring for? Caring for a young adult son who's living in my home after a traumatic brain injury. Caring for my 91-year-old dad who lives in my home. How's that? How are you feeling about that? Pause, listen. And on a scale of 0 to 10, just as we ask about pain scale, on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you managing? How are you managing? And that really creates a long pause, some time, but that could ultimately lead to prevention. And my primary care physician does know I'm a caregiver, does ask me on a routine basis when I come in with an ailment, is this due to the stress of caring? How are things going? How are things going at home? So we need to be able to ask those questions as part of our routine prevention. And then maybe we start getting into including and looking through that lens of primary care as a real part of prevention and partner in this work. Just maybe. So Jenny, help us understand the next phase to design thinking, that empathy mapping, and what that looks like.
Sure thing. So I guess, Christy and I, we were new to this. I think if you're familiar at all with the business world, this is something that people that are trying to sell you things use often. An empathy map is a visualization used to articulate what we know about our users or caregivers or clients. Users does sound very businessy, and what they need, and it can help an organization make better decisions. Maybe your organization, maybe this is something you'll want to consider after hearing about what we did and seeing some of our results. So, how does this transfer from the business world to the nonprofit world? I think the main takeaway here is that we aren't using this in a traditional way. Like, we aren't empathy mapping to make cereal sales. We are empathy mapping to make sure we understand the people we serve and how we can support them and their support team, that ripple, and also help them navigate systems of care. So how do we do that? So if you see, an empathy map has 4 quadrants, what do caregivers say, think, do, or feel? Empathy mapping can help you and helped us try to remove bias from our designs and align our team on a single shared understanding of the caregivers we serve. Discover any weakness in our research, uncover the needs the caregivers themselves might not even be aware of. I can tell you, as someone who did some of these interviews, people would be talking, and maybe this has happened to you, and then go, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that before. So, having these hour-ish interviews really help people, uncover needs that they hadn't seen before. Understand what drives caregivers' behaviors and guide us towards meaningful innovation, new programming, and again, ways to innovatively assist folks as they navigate the systems of care. So we created caregiver personas. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we did the work and what we learned. So at first, I'm always the person that's like, oh, I don't know. People might think this is too much. Oh no, people were honored to be asked and to give this kind of information. We have an overview of kind of the questions we asked on the screen. I'm gonna just quickly talk to you about what, a particular question we asked and how it kind of focused on what caregivers felt. We just asked folks to describe a particular time in which they felt fully supported by a friend or family member. So they would share that experience. And then the interviewer would ask follow-up questions such as has this changed over time? Who was it that supported you? What did they do specifically to support you? How it felt? And then kind of reflecting on the present. Like, can you think of a recent time that someone did something nice for you to support you? How did it feel? How did it make you feel? Also, kind of what type of conversations do you find most helpful and useful? And a big one, like, what do you wish your friends and family knew about your role as a caregiver? So that's kind of like an overview of the questions we asked. So, these processes really, we were, again, hoping to create a series of unique caregiver personas. We're going to get into those here. Christy's going to share one that already existed out there. Again, to better understand the people we're supporting and the ripple of effect of support in their community. So we did this. We did this to see, what are the unique needs and ways we can offer greater support. So, we want to support them. Back then, it was really, again, to kind of answer this question of how can people in the ripple effect support caregivers. I also think now it's we can look at this through the lens of systems of care. Like, how can we better support these personas as they're navigating these really challenging, in some cases, systems that they have to work in and on.
I think that's a really valid point, because honestly, I think a huge part of what we do as peer supporters is navigation through the other systems of care. So I think that's a very valid point, Jenny. I'm glad you brought that up. As social entrepreneurs, Jenny and I, even though we're innovators, we're huge fans of the boy, I'm sure hope someone else has figured this out model as a first place of reference. And so when we embarked on this new journey for us of design thinking, empathy mapping, and caregiver personas, we stumbled upon the National Alliance on Caregiving, which we love, and AARP, at which they presented a Caregiving in the U.S. 2022 report, which included a variety of personas, 11 in fact, and they existed, and many of them resonated with us. They're not exactly caregiver personas in the way Jenny just explained and how we navigated this process, and yet they offered some really great insight. And most of them were geared towards aging. So those who are caring for someone who is older and navigating that aging system of care, if you will. And so we were supporting caregivers to all relationships of care and all life transitions. And so this is one that was in existence that we did resonate with us. And this is the high intensity caregiver. And we definitely saw this in our own research, but from their work, the high intensity caregiver basically sees that caring for others is a lot and very time consuming. They often hear from others, how in the world do you juggle it all? They may think, I'm finding purpose and meaning, and they look at caregiving as just another part of my job or role, a job that I have. And yet they solidly feel much financial strain and very much stuck in the middle. And so that was one of those existing caregiver personas from that study. It is on our website should you be interested in learning more about that. The next personas are all unique to our own research and ones that we found. And this is specifically now to those caregivers supporting someone living with a behavioral health challenge. So Jenny, please share about the Just Do It caregiver. Will
do. Thank you, Christy. So the Just Do It caregiver, I think the biggest takeaway here, and again, these, you may find caregivers that are one persona, they may have a mix of personas, but this caregiver themselves, they don't really consider themselves a caregiver. They're just doing what they have to do. So they want to talk to people on their support team about anything but caregiving and want their life outside of caregiving to be validated. I mean, they want people to ask them about, what are your future plans? Again, outside of caregiving. They want to be seen as people, not just caregivers. They live this experience of caregiving, but they don't want to be called a caregiver necessarily. They're just doing their job here. So that is the Just Do It caregiver for sure. We have the lifelong caregiver. This is a person, they aren't seeing a lot of empathy. They're seeing people giving them advice and sympathy and pity. And my goodness, who wants sympathy and pity? Not me. This isn't helpful in this lifelong situation. They're going to be caregivers for the long haul. They do not want pity. But they are often seeking help. I mean, gosh, they need it. They are living caregiving in so many ways. It's going to be, again, a long haul for them. They want help, and they want you as a supporter to take some initiative to help them. Don't try to fix them with advice. Show them with your actions. I mean, that's ideal. Help them troubleshoot, but do it in a trauma-informed and tool-based way. So, and if you're in a place like a peer role, or you're a friend to someone like this who is in this caregiver experience, share your own experiences, or try to normalize what they're going through. That really helps them feel supported in what they do.
And the next caregiver is the survivor thriver caregiver. And I think the biggest takeaways here for me are that when they see, I chose to stay when the world says leave. That's a direct quote from one of the caregivers we interviewed. They chose to stay when the world says leave. And then they hear often, why in the world do you put up with this? This might be someone who actually tries to give unhelpful advice in the process, not the survivor thriver, but the support network. Gosh, if you only had better boundaries. I mean, how many times as a caregiver have we heard that? When if you have a neurotypical child, you don't understand. But thank you for your advice. And I think as we work with our clients, our peers, and communicating with them, it might be things like making sure, and I know this is a huge part of our peer support here, but identifying and validating their strengths, because they may not see those. That might be really hard for them to see them. But gee, Jenny, I see this real strength of yours, and I so appreciate it, and I know your family does too. Getting them to see their extension of who's in their support network, because it may not be obvious to them. And they may face some real loneliness and isolation, which as we continue to explore these, there's a lot of caregivers that experience that, but really finding ways that work for them to combat that experience of isolation and loneliness. The giver caregiver, and there's some very subtle nuances between some of these caregivers, and many of our clients may be a combination. I know I am myself a combination of several of these personas, but I think the biggest takeaways for me here for this persona is that they'll often say, I don't have time. I don't have time to take care of myself. I don't have time for self-care. I don't have time for my own health and well-being. And so it's working with them to, how do we reprioritize? Because I would argue that there's always a way to find time, but maybe it's about a reprioritization. There's also some barriers to taking care of their own health and wellness. So identifying those barriers and looking at solutions for those might be a way to help them break that down. I think of one of our peer supporters, honestly, that fits this persona. And this person will often say that they have been caring for someone else since the beginning of time, as a daughter, as a partner, as a parent, as an extended family member. They are just built, these people, they are just the built-in, born to care kind of people. Maybe you are one of these people. And so making sure that we also hear them, help them to prioritize, and then also really looking at them without judgment or shame, because they may also be feeling much of that themselves.
This is a hard one. The isolated caregiver. I think one of the biggest takeaways is these caregivers really see people avoiding their loved one. And this loved one is a huge part of their caregiver's life. They don't want you to ignore their loved one, because maybe their family does, or the general community does as well. So how do you best support someone who is the isolated caregiver? Ask about how their loved one is doing. Ask how they support their loved one and themselves. Show real interest in their caregiving role. This is a lot different, in my opinion, from the just do it caregiver. They want to talk about how they care for the person they love. What is it they love about caregiving? What is it they love about their loved one? Again, support them in that way, and they will love you for it.
I think what's so hard about this persona is that what we heard in those interviews that made it so hard to hear was that they're driven into more isolation and shame because of what they're hearing, that judgment from others. And often when the support network for someone like this, when it's so hard, you just don't know what to say. So you often don't say anything at all. So being brave enough and willing to ask is going to be that great first step. And what do you need? How can I best support you? The team of one caregiver, you know, you might, as you hear this type of person, hear a little bit of victim, a little bit of martyr, a little bit of scapegoat. They it really boils down to their own story of trauma often, where they're just unable to trust anyone else in their life to provide the care, because they don't. They're like, I'm the only one that can do this. No one can do it in the same way. No one does it as good as me. I'm it. And they've likely been hurt before, and they just don't find those relationships safe. And so this is really a client where you're going to be working to help them see other relationships as safe, helping, this could be navigating systems of care, folks, right? Where you've got people who are like, I called that agency 5 times and they never returned my call. Well, if you're hearing that as a peer, then I'm going to get involved and I'm going to help to work to advocate for them. If we're making a referral, why aren't those referring agencies returning phone calls? We do. I'd be highly embarrassed if we didn't return phone calls after 5 times, but we're hearing this from our clients over and over again. They are very sensitive to judgment and this difficulty in accepting help of any kind. You have to build it and build it small, and it's going to start with you. If you're a peer and you're maybe that first person, but it's going to be hard for them to trust you at first. So you're going to have to build that very slowly with this client over time to help them to see you as a trusted resource. The no way out caregiver, unlike the giver caregiver, who said that being a caregiver is their sole identity, the no way out caregiver says, I do not identify as a caregiver. And in contrast, they really share that every day they have to make a conscious choice to care every single day. And as I support caregivers with this persona, and I do see this often because they're tired, they're worn out, they don't believe they have any other support or help systems, I am encouraging them to stay, encouraging them not to give up, encouraging them to find small ways and then larger ways to take better care of themselves because they have given their heart and soul to their loved ones. So how do they better care for themselves so they can actually give better care? Understanding how they feel supported is a really big part of chipping away at this persona. So where do they feel support? Where do they feel loved? And understanding that so that we can help them. And, these are real fighters. Like I just don't want this job. And yet they have landed here. And so what do we do them to help them to find those little small joys again, to see their extended network of people who could be helping them and finding the motivation again that's going to flip it from one of burden to one that's solidly towards the middle and reaching towards joy again. And again, this can be very, very hard, but it is possible. It is possible to find that again. And peer support plays a huge role because I can guarantee at one point in our journey, someone will have felt this way.
Perfect. Well, this is almost the end. We want to close with this beautiful quote here. As you're kind of coming to a close here at the summit and going back out into the world, you've probably never left it because I'm sure you're answering emails. But really, just consider this as you're supporting people, as you are helping folks navigate systems of care. I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples. Thank you for coming. Christy has another slide.
We want to be a resource to you. We support you as well as those you support. We want to be a part of your support network. please reach out to connect. We're here for you, and let us know how we can help. So if there's any questions in the chat, Jenny, I haven't been over on that screen lately. Let's see. Anyone have any questions for us? They feel free to put them in the chat. It takes. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Bridget, do you want us to answer questions and then wrap up? How would you like to do this? We have just 4 minutes.
Sure. That Q&A, you all can, I can read them to you all to answer, or y'all can pick which ones. Up to you.
I can take a look. Do you find that the types of caregivers often cross the lines and can identify with several definitions? 100%. Oh, that looks so pretty. Wow, airmeet.com. That's great. So yes, 100%, Debbie, we do. These are very kind of broad. There are people that I'm like, oh yeah, 100%. There's someone that Christy supports that I'm like, yeah, they are the no way out. That is them. But sometimes it depends on the day, honestly, and that they can identify with these personas. These are pretty broad personas. Christy, anything to add to that question?
Just that they're a compilation in and of themselves, and we tried to separate these kind of bigger areas all in the name of better support.
Yeah.
What do they need, and how can we support you? We must, as peers, we ask that question every week. What are your goals this week? How can we support you? Sometimes it's resources, sometimes it's navigation, sometimes it's just listening. I see another question here. How do we stop pulling people out of the river if we are basically the only one responsible? And I think, Debbie, when we talked about that in the presentation, Jenny, I think, was the one that mentioned, we wish we had the secret sauce on prevention. It really speaks to the prevention concern. I think there's solidly, and I say this over and over again to peers, solidly a fine line between enabling and yet keeping people afloat. And sometimes there's this really small window, very small window between keeping them afloat and enabling. And I think our goal is to really shift from enabling to keeping them afloat. So as we advocate and empower caregivers, how are they advocating and empowering their loved ones? It becomes a true ripple effect of, we know, and my guess is you would all agree, we know that when someone is taking better care of themselves, they provide better care to others. And then as caregivers are healthier and stronger, then whole families are getting healthier and stronger, which we believe, and it's part of our brand new vision statement that we're about to unfurl. We then believe that healthier, stronger families lead to healthier, stronger communities. I mean, this is the public health of the caregiver burnout crisis. So I'd say you take it slow, Debbie. You just keep going. And when you feel like you can't keep going, you ask for a lifeline. And people like us and other people who are here at this summit this week are solidly part of that solution. Don't ever, 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 ever give up, because we're here. We got you. And then I think the last question in our last minute, maybe, how do we advocate and make normal for insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid to actually pay family caregivers? Many of us are already working full-time jobs, caring for special needs children and elderly parents. There is a lot of great news feeds out there that talk about Medicare Advantage in Ohio is there and on the cutting edge of this. But when you look at all of the aging systems, right now, that is their first target, but there is legislation out to increase this, and there's some that exists. So following people like, NTAC, as we come out of the system of care summit, solidly paying attention to some of those things, being in touch with your state legislature, being in touch with your loved one's insurance carriers. There are some states that are solidly on the front line of making this possible, but we have a lot more work to do to advocate for that, to get this reimbursable for family members for those out-of-pocket expenses. I know that there is also legislation that recently passed that, let's just say your loved one requires medical assistance, you can be trained to provide some of that basic medical care and the future long-term care. It's state by state, but it is a national legislation priority, and we've all got to keep strong with our voices and talking to our state legislatures about these important issues. We just appreciate you being with us today. Jenny, is there anything I didn't leave off, or any questions that we didn't get answered?
Bridget needs a couple minutes here, so I'm gonna.
Okay, great.
Yes, I'm sorry we have to close. Elizabeth, I encourage you to grab Jenny's and Christy's email from the screen here so you can email them your question and hopefully they can help you with some more resources. Christy, Jenny, thank y'all so much. I learned a lot. As y'all know, my mom is a caregiver right now, and it's a lot. It is a lot. And yelling at her from up here, I will stop yelling at her and I will try to be more patient to take care of herself. So again, thank you to all of you who joined this session. Our next session will be in 30 minutes. We'll have, 28 minutes. So we'll take a break, but we'll be back for our keynote presentation from Vanessa Williams. And the presentation is titled Echoes of a Journey Navigating Youth and Young Adult Crisis Services, Yesterday's, I'm so sorry. Yesteryears to today. Vanessa Williams will illuminate the evolving strategies, societal shifts, and personal growth that have shaped the journey through crisis services. This poignant presentation not only unravels the speaker's unique journey, but also resonates as a testament to the collective struggles and victories faced by individuals navigating mental health challenges. Please don't forget to complete the survey that will be posted on the reception page at the end of the day, and it will also be emailed out to all of you. You have to complete the survey to request CE hours if you need them. Again, Christy, Jenny, thank you for being here. I'm sure NTEC is going to call y'all every year, twice a year, to come back. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day, and we'll see you after the break.